Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and I'm welcoming you to another discussion that I hope will be very informative to those of you who are watching this show. For those of you who are new to the show, the Umoja Circle is an African-centered talk show whose purpose is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. This is a very special show for me because I am a reader of books. And this show also will be should be shown during Black History Month in February. So it'll be very appropriate for something that is very important, my love for history and also for my love for reading. I'm not alone in this endeavor. With me today in this discussion is a scholar, a historian, a documentarian, a playwright, I think I said author. I'd like to introduce to the Umoja Circle, Baba Maat. Welcome to the show,
Yes,
brother.
sir. Hotel, brother. Thank
Thank to you. And I also want to let people know that he's also what I would call my Rafiki. Rafiki is a Kiswahili word that means friend. And he's been a friend of mine for many, many years, besides being this dynamic person that I think should really be known to many people here in the San Antonio area. We have the privilege of having them live here. As you can see in front of me, the stack of books. And one of the things me and and Brother Maat, Baba Andad, we call him, and I'll call him that from now on. Baba Anda have always done when we talk to each other is talk about the need for, especially our young, to start reading at a very, very early age. In fact, again, this brother doesn't only talk the talk, but he walks the walk. And he does also have these African festivals where you can have, where he finds spaces for brothers and sisters to, with black business to share their wealth. And also he is a bookseller. And some of these books that I have on my stack I've got from him and his beautiful wife, his queen, Baba Maat. They'll be selling a lot of these books. And he also, for the last, 5 or 6 years, you've been doing giving out books to kids because you really believe that you have to start at a very young age.
No doubt. Yes, sir.
Tell us about that program.
Actually, this year would be the 5th year. We started a program called the Black History for Children Book Exhibit.
Okay.
And of course, the motivating force behind that was really the importance of literacy. And of course, talking about the skill of reading and writing. And we said that we as young with our children, we have to give them, encourage them to read and write. And of course, this is one of the skills we know that is mandatory if you're going to read books and if you're going to be successful in this world. The other thing is that we wanted to share books about Black history.
Very important.
And we wanted to expose, because you could read a whole lot of things, but one of the things that we believe is that we must have our young people reading about themselves and just encouraging children to read these history books. So as you mentioned, one of the things we've been able to and very fortunate to do is that the community has been very supportive and have contributed and made possible where we were able to get books where the children that come out to the program, we give them books.
Got you.
Like one of the first books is this book right here. It's Black History, of course, books of Black heroes.
Okay.
And this was the first book we gave out 4 years ago. And this book, of course, it just goes through a series of Black people out of history, and it has a little bio on each one. And of course, then we gave out this one here with Black politicians. It's interesting because in this one, you have even the former mayor, Ivy Taylor, in this book.
Okay.
This one we gave out, I think, our second year, which was Black scientists and inventors.
Wow.
And actually, this one right here we gave out last year, wanted to talk about Black women in history. So for the most part, the children have come out, have received, it's a series of books they have received.
And what you're seeing right there is a little library.
Thank you.
And that is very important. You see, again, we have these stacks of books, and this comes from both of our libraries. And this ain't nothing
I know
compared
that's right.
to what we've had. Because one time we were those young kids.
That's right.
And the information we're working on today, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you hear this too. When you do a lecture, or one of your lectures, or you come off one of your programs, people do come up to you and ask
Yes.
you, where do you get this knowledge? Because
Yes.
I've heard you speak, and the plethora of things and things that people never thought, I never thought of it that way. But you you have a way of expressing our history and tying it into the day.
Today, yes, sir.
But people don't know that without this knowledge right
Yes.
here,
Yeah.
you cannot do what you
to
do. Oh.
And I think, and that's the whole point, because earlier we was talking about the importance of changing our mindset, and we had talked about how these books, in a way, kind of started to shape us in how we thought and how we talked, and then of course how we act. And I know you're gonna go through the books,
Yeah.
but one of the first books that really impacted me, that really kind of transformed my way of thinking, or at least broadened my way of thinking, was the Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Let's start with that one right here. I'm going to put it up there. This book, people don't realize this. It came out in 1965, just about the time he was assassinated. It was done in collaboration with him and Alex Haley.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
right, correct?
Yes.
But people don't realize that everybody who's read this book, you and me, and look at this book. Now, it's not a pretty looking book, but I did it deliberately. I show it deliberately in this condition to let you know that we do read our books. And if a book doesn't look like this, then it's just some decoration, you know?
Yes, sir.
You want to talk about how it influenced you a little bit?
I read this book, of course, I graduated from high school, 1982. And that's the first time I read this book, was in 1982. I read it again in 1988. And I think at that point, I started to really understand that if I was going to change and become the man I want to be, then I was going to have greater knowledge of our history.
Know thyself.
Yes, and I think from Malcolm X's life experience here, that's recorded in this book, it talks about the importance of transformation. And one of the things that's highlighted in this book that helped Malcolm to transform and to become the hero that we see him as of today is because he started to read and
he went to
study.
the library.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
So I realized that, so this book helped me to understand a path on which I could start off on if I wanted to become a better man.
People don't realize how important knowledge of self is.
Yes.
Malcolm, come to think of it, if I remember a quote of Malcolm, we said that we must pass the truth, and maybe from his experience, we must pass the truth to the next generations.
Yes.
Teach them early, he says, what we learned late. And that's a powerful statement.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because I think I shared with you a little early. This book, and if I can just show this book right here.
The Black Book?
The Black Book.
35th Anniversary Edition.
This was, when I was growing up, brother, this was the only book we had in our home.
Wow.
And I mean, as a child, I used to flip through this book. And of course, it's, I think, planted a seed because it helped me to start realizing that there was more to our story than what I was being taught in school. So just by having that book in our house.
Gave you another perspective.
Exactly.
You remind me of an ancient saying that I read in a book many years ago that said that a house that has a library is a house that has a soul.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And that's a powerful statement. Again, you will not hear this stuff in the world at large unless you delve into the wisdom of the book. Because the person who wrote, said those words thousands of years ago, when you read it in a book, you're talking to that person at the moment you're reading.
Perfect.
When you read the Autobiography of Malcolm X, he is talking to you at the moment you're reading. You're having a conversation with Malcolm. That's the power of the book. He's dead in the body, but his spirit is in the book.
Yes, and it comes out because, many times as you're reading about these great people in our history, is that we're connecting with their life experience. which is our life experience.
You recognize
Yes,
similarities, exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I think was so powerful about the autobiography of Malcolm X, because I realized that that was my life as much as it's the life of Malcolm and your life. And so,
Yeah, because I read the same book and you read the same
yes,
book, but I saw it as something unique to me
yes,
in how I interpreted the word, because the way he and Alex Haley set it up, Alex Haley said that he diminished his voice. They were having a conversation like you and I have,
yeah,
but Alex Haley just saw something in what Malcolm was saying,
yeah,
and he said, hey, you know, I'm just going to put down what this brother
that's right.
said. And when you hear reviews of this book by people who, throughout the decades, in 1965 is a long way from 2020, everybody who's said these books, every time I read somebody's synopsis of what they read, he always said, I found it profound. It was earth-shattering. It changed my life.
Yes.
So the word that he's saying, he's talking not only to Alex Haley, but he's talking to you in the way that this book was written.
And I think that's a great point, brother, because when we go through these books, and I've read a few of these books, the idea is that these books speak to us. They talk to us. It's like those of the past, our ancestors are speaking to us
That's
present.
an African way of thinking. We don't think it like the Westerners who came from the northern part of the hemisphere and had this separation type of concept that was infused into our thinking because of 246 years of enslavement. So we got to understand that the psychology that came out of those things, we were disconnected from those type of ancient ways. We are descendants of an ancient people.
That's right.
And that's what these books tell you.
us. Yes.
Tell us. We didn't just come out of poof in 1619. There were people who came off those ships and had to survive 246 years. And I'm just talking from 1619 to 1865. Then another 100 years of Jim Crow segregation. You know, and only 50 years since or more, or since 1964 Civil Rights Act, that we're trying to reconnect to those things. And how could you reconnect if you don't have the knowledge of who you are? An ancient, term that you and I like to use is know thyself. Why do you think people of the ancients said those, from your perspective, brother?
I think in order for us to be the great people that we are destined to be, we have to know who we are, where we came from, what we have done, therefore telling us what we can do.
Yes.
So when they talk about know thyself, they're saying it's in us. It's not like this is somewhere that's
but somebody got to turn the light on.
That's right. Because what the books, to me, really, it's not so much what the book is putting in us, it's also what the book is bringing out of us.
Because certain things seem, aha. That's when you have the aha moment. The aha don't come from outside of you. It's like a light bulb
goes on within you.
That's the metaphor that's used.
Yes, because that information now opens up a world. And a lot of times I think of it in terms of that these books are really in our DNA. The information is already there. It's just when we read these books, then they reconnect us and open us up.
The circuitry is reconnected.
Exactly.
And that's what they talk about. Some of the readings I've had, like Amos Wilson or Dr. Naim Akbar, who are not only were professional psychiatrists and psychologists who dedicated their life to the minds of people of African descent. But they always say that we have, I think with Dr. Ashwa Kwesi says it also, we have genetic memory. And he talked about the DNA. But coincidentally, the last couple of years with the genome studies, they're showing that information that's passed on from 2 or 3 or 4 generations affect the DNA in us to this day. Either turns it on or turns it off. So there is literally, and we were saying that for decades, but science is finally catching up to showing that the DNA is literally turned on and off by what you're passed on from your previous generation.
And that's what these books do. Like the book that you have on top right there
Which
with
one
the
here?
Nile
This one?
Valley
Oh, yeah,
Civilization.
this is a very powerful book here.
Yeah, Brother Anthony Browder.
Yes.
Of course, written a number of books, but this is the book I think that really helped me to better understand our connection to ancient Egypt, Kemet, the land of the blacks.
As you can
Now,
you can see by the condition. Again,
Yes.
this is one of those books that I read over and over again. Every couple of years, I read this book, and you can tell by the post-its and all this. I read it. This was the first book. Like you said about the Egyptians. This was the first book that turned me on to the fact that scientifically that the Egyptians were black. Even in 2020, or you can look at Discovery Channels and all these so-called scientific, you can hold on, the scientific documentary. When they show images of the Egyptians, they don't look like you or me. But in this book, and he introduced me to Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, and what he did in the, well, there was a Nile, they were called Nile Valley Conference in 1974. That was put on by UNESCO. For those of you who don't know what UNESCO is the United Nations Science and Economic Commission. It is run by the UN. And they put on a symposium in 1974 in Cairo, Egypt, and they gathered all the greatest anthropologists, Egyptologists, linguists at the time. And there was only 2 black faces in all those groups. And one of them was Sheikh Anta Diop.
Yes.
And Dr. Obenga. Yeah, Theophilus Obenga. And they were the only ones that came prepared.
Yes.
And Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, through 11, not just one discipline, okay, you got archaeology, anthropology, sociology, linguistics,
yes.
iconography, that means the pottery and the images that are put on the wall. He showed that they were black people.
And he had come up, the melanin test.
That's what I was going to call. That's what I'm leading
Yeah.
to. Yeah, the melanin dosage test is where that's the test scientifically that showed how you can show they took a piece
mummies,
of the skin of the I hate to use that word mummy.
Okay.
You know, but the cot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cot. But you know, we know it as the mummy. That's again is the European derogatory terminology. And you put it in there, and there's a chemical barium sodium, or sodium barium. But what it does, it fluorescence it crystallizes the melanin. And you put it under some sun or ultraviolet light, and then you could read the crystal, literally.
Yes.
And if there's a lot of crystals,
You know, that's a melanized person.
and all those mummies or cots had a whole abundance. So they've proven it scientifically.
Yes.
You know, he's proven, and today that's why we talk, you got to read. How many people know that story? Since 1974, and all these educated brothers and sisters who took classes in all these colleges and universities, how many of you have ever heard of the melanin dosage test? I want to ask you. If you didn't have to research and find it in a book, that this book right here, okay? Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. It's in the books.
Yes.
There's no debate that they were black people.
And I just add, you know, I had an opportunity to go with Brother Ashwa Kwesi to Africa, to Kemet in 1999. And of course, the beautiful thing about it is that as I going through to the pyramids and to the temples and going down the Nile, I reflected on many times what was in the book. But this is the key, brothers. See, I would not have wanted to go to Kemet if I had not read about it in the books. What made me want to go to see
what the stuff
was
that
I had read in the books. So I tell people, if we really want to go back to Africa, I mean, just to visit, first of all, we got to learn about Africa, and it's written in the books. So once you read what's in the books, then your mind said, well, I want to go back there and see that.
I don't know how many journeys I've taken around the world.
Just, I know that's right.
Through the books.
Yes.
You go places without having to take a step.
Yes.
You go in your mind, and the first thing, one of the things we say about the show, it takes, once you have, through dialogue or through knowledge, there's a shift in consciousness. And when there's a shift in consciousness, there's a change to your world.
That's right. And it opens up the world to you. That's why we earlier we talked about the children. Open up a world to the children. Open up a world to us. So what inspired us, what takes us places where we might be not physically able to go are the books. It can take us back in time. It can take us into the future.
It's a spiritual thing to knowledge of knowing yourself. The mind cannot love what is distorted in, I mean, you cannot love what is distorted in your mind, right?
That's right.
And, and what information are we, that's what, this is being shown during Black History Month. Why do people think that Carter G. Woodson established Black History Week back in 1926, brother? He was a Harvard graduate.
Yeah.
He said one time, didn't he say, as Malawana Karenga would say, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, he said that it took him 25 years to undo what he was taught going to those so-called institutions.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because as much as we go to those institutions, very rarely do those institutions have these books in those courses.
Or in those ways.
Yes. So he was saying basically, look here, yeah, I went to Harvard and I learned this, but what we need to know as a people is also the knowledge of ourselves. And that's why, of course, you talked about, I mean, just mentioned the fact to start a Negro History Week now, which we have Black History Month. But the idea, he understood the importance because he had gone through the process. He understood through his own research there was a lot more to our history that we are not aware and don't know.
And if you don't have that knowledge, I think you've heard this said before, no people can intelligently know what is good for them if they don't intelligently know who they are. If you don't know who you are, you know, when you go to a doctor, if the doctor don't take your medical history,
That's right.
how is he going to treat you right there in the present moment? He got to go into your past and find out what's uniquely. We're both black men, but are we medically the same? Each one of us have a unique history. And without that knowledge, no doctor would adequately touch you. If you're going for a bank loan,
they're going to look at your history.
Your financial history before they even look at the paperwork. You know, and all these things that are part of our day-to-day life, we have to use this history for you to function. And yet we are conditioned as people of African descent to dislike history. And it's no coincidence that I feel that most of our children think history is boring. You hear that a lot.
Yes. And I think that's one of the reasons that we promote the literacy with Black history, because we think our children, it's hard for children to connect with history where they don't see themselves in the history or in the story.
Yes.
So just sometimes having the images that's connected with the story is powerful because they can see themselves. It's like looking into the mirror and saying, I'm reading about myself.
You know, that brings up a point. Again, it's something that I've read along the way. I like to read about children, and I'm always reading about our people and the psychology of our people. There's certain books I'm going to talk about with Amos Wilson and Naeem Akbar who talked about the mind. If you don't understand, you know, people tend to look at behavior. We're conditioned to look at behavior. But if you don't understand the ideas that produce those behaviors,
that's right.
then you're looking at the wrong thing. A lot of things, Malcolm said, we're hoodwinked and bamboozled.
Yeah.
Oh, those black people are behaving this way, or they'll show images of these behaviors. But we got to understand what kind of ideas were we conditioned from the time we were children to perform that way. You cannot perform any way than you think.
That's right.
And if we're performing in a detrimental way, then what the ideas that we're working on is detrimental. And I like what you're doing because, again, you're following Malcolm, whether you would say it or not, but I see it in you. To me, reading to children, even if they, like you said, they don't even know what the words that you're using. They see the picture, but what it does, if you have a child on your lap, and you're showing it love, and you say, hey, Johnny, or hey, Kawisha, and you're talking to them, that is love, and that is caring that they will associate with that book.
That's right. And just a quick story with that, because our grandson, Rayson, he's 3. So whenever he comes over, he likes, of course, I want to sit down and read with him. So it's a little book that he likes. It's titled Light as a Feather. And it's the 42 Laws of Ma'at for children.
Okay, got you.
Well, anyway, he goes and gets this little book, and we sit down and we read the book. And in the book, of course, it starts off as a long time ago, that we lived in peace and harmony. There was no wars and no police, and because everybody lived according to the laws of Ma'at.
Yeah.
So now, and I'm saying that to say now, that's history, because that's part of the history that's documented even in this book, the laws of Ma'at. See, the first time I came across the laws of Ma'at was really coming out of the Nile Valley civilization.
And you're
Anthony
much
Browder.
older.
Yes, and I'm much older. So now he's being introduced at least to that information. A seed is being planted. So we have to realize, as much as we plant seeds in our children, we also have to plant seeds in ourselves. And these are the books that will plant seeds in us and help us to start to grow and come into the power of ourselves.
Again, you trigger certain things in me. That's what, again, when you have conversation like we are showing you here, it triggers certain things and certain memories, the DNA most likely, because you brought up something that, again, it was a quote by an elder called Dick Gregory. He passed a few years ago, Brother Dick Gregory. And he said that we must program our own mind.
That's right.
Because if we don't program it, somebody else will program it. And we don't understand the power of culture. Okay, culture is a way of people, I think with Brother Malawana Karenga. I said, because his brother used to bring in all kinds of different great scholars here in San Antonio. And you brought in Malawana Karenga many years ago, and I remember, I never forgot what he said and what he brought to me, that we all, no, with Dr. Naeem Arpart, he said, we all carry the mind of those who came before us.
That's right.
When you're that little boy, like your little grandchild, he is being the foundation of his thought process of what he hears from his grandparents, his elders.
Yes.
And from that foundation, then he started searching and learning on his own. So we all carry the memory. But if the information that is coming from our parents and our grandparents, no fault of their own,
that's right,
is messed up, then our whole foundational thinking process is
because
messed up.
The other thing is that we realize is that we cannot teach what we do not know. And I'm talking about as adults.
And again, I'm going to have to stop us right here. We only got less than 30 seconds on this part. But this is only part 1 of a 2-part series. And you see why we consider reading is more than just fundamental, it's who we are. We must know thyself. Again, you can't intelligently know what is good for you until you intelligently know who you are. And thinking requires study, okay? So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.